It must have been the most humiliating experience. Haman, the villain of the story in the Book of Esther, has had the experience of having had to honor Mordecai, whose death he was plotting when he assumed the king was going to honor him. Now he returns home to get ready to go back to the palace for a second banquet, which Esther has prepared for him and for the king. And if he thought his day was already going badly, it was about to get much, much worse. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. When Haman returned to his home to lick his wounds, his wife, far from consoling him, confronts him with a brutal reality. She said, "If Mordecai, before whom your downfall has begun, is of the Jewish people, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him." Her words were to prove prophetic, and very soon. Before they were even finished with their conversation, the king's servants come to Haman's house to hurry him off to the waiting banquet. It is at this banquet that the second of the great ironies of the story is resolved. You'll recall that this is the irony of Haman building a comically large set of gallows in the middle of the city where he planned to hang Mordecai. We're about to see how Haman's action proves brutally ironic. When he arrives at the banquet, he finds that Esther has indeed prepared a feast just for the two of them, Haman and King Ahasuerus. Recall that Esther had hatched a plan to save her people from destruction. She had entered the king's chamber without being invited, which could have resulted in her death. But Ahasuerus showed her mercy and asked what her petition was. She then invited the king and Haman to a banquet that very day. When they were enjoying the banquet, Ahasuerus asked again what her petition was. She answered that she would make her petition known the next day at yet another banquet, the one to which Haman had just come. Things were about to turn very badly for Haman. Let me read the entire episode. So the king and Haman went into the feast with Queen Esther. On the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king again said to Esther, "What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me. That is my petition, and the lives of my people. That is my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have held my peace. But no enemy can compensate for this damage to the king." Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who is he and where is he who has presumed to do this?" Esther said, "A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. The king rose from the feast in wrath and went into the palace garden, but Haman stayed to beg his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that the king had determined to destroy him. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman had thrown himself on the couch where Esther was reclining. And the king said, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence, in my own house?" As the words left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, "Look, the very gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, stands at Haman's house 50 cubits high." And the king said, "Hang him on that." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the anger of the king abated. Esther has proved masterful in setting up Haman. By the time she makes her request to Ahasuerus, she has built up the suspense so that by now the king knows it's going to be an important request. And she sets up the narrative by making it a story about someone who had plotted to kill the entire Jewish people living in Persia. When the king had signed off on the plot, he didn't know who Haman was targeting. only that Haman convinced him there was some evil group within the kingdom undermining his rule. In yet one more bit of irony, Esther does not at first name the foe and enemy who plotted the death of the Jews, just as Haman had not named the Jews as his intended victims. But now the king shows a level of curiosity that he had not demonstrated when Haman hatched his plot. "Who is he, and where is he, who has presumed to do this?" he asked Esther. And with perfectly timed dramatic flair, she declares a foe and enemy, this wicked Haman. And in the understatement of the year, the writer reports, "Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen." I should say so. He knows what's coming next. But before he can declare a sentence, Haman throws himself on Esther's couch. And when Ahasuerus comes back in, he assumes Haman is assaulting the queen under his very nose in his own house. With that, the irony of the gallows becomes evident. The very gallows Haman had built for Mordecai now becomes the instrument of his own demise. A brutal irony, indeed. Tomorrow, Esther pleads with the king to reverse the royal decree that would result in the destruction of the Jews. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.